Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and me, Fred Carroll. Today, we're going to bring in a friend of Scott's named Doug. Doug, who's a big Grateful Dead guy. And that's all I know about him. So, Doug, you get to tell the people what you want to tell the people about Doug. How are you?
You want me to tell the people about Doug, huh?
Yes, tell us all about Doug.
That's a really open-ended question, and Scott knows me well. I'm pretty long-winded when it comes to Doug. It's my favorite subject, right? But yeah, thanks for having me on here, guys. I didn't know what to expect coming in here, and yeah, I'm a huge Deadhead. I followed the Dead for quite some time, and it got me into a lot of trouble, but I have a lot of great memories as well. But yeah, man, I'm an East Coast guy. I'm from Massachusetts originally, and I moved out here in '94 to run away from all my problems. You know what I'm saying? I think I went about as far away as I could possibly get without leaving the country to try to escape. My mother passed when I was 19, and I tried to take that whole burden on my shoulders at that young age, and I basically crumbled, right? And I just kind of walked away from it all. So, a lot of stuff has happened in my life as a result of that, and I've gone through a little bit of trauma as a result of that. But today, I live a rich life, and the story in between is a pretty wild ride. But today, my life is the kind of life that my wife and I used to talk about on bar stools. You know what I'm saying? So rich life today. I'm super happy, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah.
Well, that's a wrap. Good job.
Yep, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me. Yeah, anything else you want to know, I could talk to, but there's a lot of things in between. I'm open if there's any questions that you might have, about recovery, about anything else. I'm open. So.
Tell us a little about your experience in recovery, Doug, if you don't mind. And by the way, I don't know if I got a chance to let you answer the question, but I sent you an email about wanting to ask you certain questions. Did you get that email?
I probably did, but I didn't get back to you on it. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, I never.
All right, so I'll just have to make up my questions as we go. But no, I think our viewers would like to hear. They hear from me and they hear from Fred. But as our guest today, tell us a little bit about your journey. You kind of opened and closed it pretty quick there, but things in between that you think people who imagine families struggling or an individual who's struggling out there right now with some, whether it be self-medication or, substance use disorder or abuse, or have a family member they love and don't know what to do, what would you want to tell them? Because I think that people need to hear it. I think people with lived experience, which I know you have, are generally not the ones that are at the forefront. It's usually a medical director or a clinical director or someone who runs a facility, and they talk about, kind of like the 30,000 foot level, but really don't get into the nuts and bolts of what it's really like and what it really takes, and what people need to understand that if they're not willing, that's okay. There are people that can help you get there. So kind of speak to that a little bit, if you don't mind, for a few.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Thanks. Yeah.
By the way, we don't have a timer here. I know that one. We always want a fucking timer, but we don't have a timer here. So you got your own watch. Go ahead.
No, cool. Yeah, man. Man, what a journey it has been. I think everything started for me when my mom passed. I grew up, an only child. My mom left us when I was 2 years old, and I didn't have a father figure growing up. I had a lot of resentment towards my dad over all that stuff. And then, my mom raised us on a beautician's salary, but I got everything I needed, dude. My mother was a normie. She worked her ass off. She showed me, how to be a good human being, so all amazing, beautiful things. I played sports growing up. I had a hell of a life growing up. I think that, for me, like, if anything, like I was always like just the, like the big guy, the heavy set guy, the guy that, when I grew up, I got teased about being a heavy kid, and about, I got poked fun at for that kind of stuff. But I was at the same time a big kid, so a lot of guys didn't really blow me a lot of shit. But I did struggle with that a little bit, and I think that kind of, you know, I tried to find some relief from that, right? And so I dabbled. I started to go down that road of, drugs and alcohol, and just a little bit, a little pot here, a little beer there. But, when my mom got sick and she got cancer, um, she passed from lung cancer in '91, and that was my life, and I just like I was raised Catholic, but I only went to church because, my mother brought me there, and I think a lot of us growing up have that kind of thing in our lives. Maybe not all of us, but I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that, we go to church because our parents go to church, right? And so, at that point, anything that I knew from my childhood as a God or a power bigger than myself, I abandoned that. I was pissed off at it. So, I drank at it. I drugged at it. And I did everything I could to, get away from the crushing blow that was my mother's death and everything that came in the wake of that, and so, I did a little bit of a geographical down to Florida. I went down and spent some time with my dad, had a couple guys rent the house. I came back up, lived at the house for a while. And, at one point I got so overwhelmed with what life was handing me, I decided to leave. And what I mean by leave is I asked the men that were living in my house to move out, that I was going to be leaving. And when I left, I literally grabbed my chocolate lab, about 500 Grateful Dead bootlegs, my stereo, an ounce of weed, and some clothes. And I got in my Volkswagen van and I walked out the front fucking door, and the TV was on. There was probably something on the stove, and I left the door wide open, and I just bolted, dude, and I started driving, and I tried to put all that behind me. And you could imagine what that looked like, right? I mean, lots of pot, lots of drinking. This is abandoning something that my mother worked her ass off all her life to provide for me. It was her house, it was her car, everything in it was hers. I left the family recipes, the photo albums, the everything, and man, that eventually caught up to me at some point when I got into California. I was still torn with the dead for a while at that point. I had tickets. It was '94 when I got to Cali, to San Diego, but '95 Jerry passed. So, that kind of trip was over, right? But I was a bartender and I was slinging drinks and I was still partying, and the level of party went up, and I think that that was in '94, and I just raged for a lot of years. I think it wasn't until probably 2000 ish, about 2000, I had a pretty bad cocaine problem, and I decided that I was going to try to get my life together, and my life was crumbling around me. And so I on my own, I knew nothing about recovery at this point, and on my own, I decided through my work, I think I had Kaiser Permanente as my insurance, and I went down to Kaiser, and I enrolled myself in their outpatient program, and I started going to group meetings. And boy, I'll tell you one thing, man. Like, I'd get off work. At that point, I was running the Butcher Shop Steakhouse. I was the bar manager at the one up in Kearney Mesa. And I worked there for about 10 years as the bar manager. And I worked all day bar shifts. And I did all the ordering while I was there during the day. So that 5 o'clock bell was my hour to, like, go meet my guy or pick up my, beer or choice whatever I was drinking that day. And so when I got into the recovery at Kaiser, man, I couldn't get to the fucking room quick enough. Like it was like this safe haven for me where I could show up and I could get in the door and I could stop worrying, because I was just itching to I don't know what got me there. It was like, sometimes in recovery, they talk about God was doing something for me that I couldn't do for myself. And I believe that was one of those moments for me that it was like this moment, this window of grace that was presented to me, a place to go, another avenue that somehow I think I only put one leg through the window and never stepped all the way through, but I found some recovery. I got some outside help through a psychiatrist. And I was dry for probably about 4 years. And life was pretty good, but I lost a bunch of weight. My ego went up. My pride was out the window. I was still the same selfish and self-centered person that I was before I stopped drinking, and I just kind of channeled that into other avenues, right? And I became a womanizer. I was drinking non-alcoholic beer, became a womanizer, and just life wasn't going so well for me. And I still was I still had all this stuff inside me that I hadn't talked about, right? So I went on a trip to see some music, Widespread Panic at this point, out at Red Rocks in Colorado with a good buddy of mine from Cape Cod, and we went out to play golf, not disc golf actually. I was still playing some round ball at that point, and we got there, we went to the golf course. The front nine, I was drinking old duels, and at the turn I said, you want another one? He said, yeah. And I went and got him a fat tire, and I ordered no duels, and I said, you know what, why don't you just give me 2 fat tires? And from that point on, I was off to the races again. I was, out to dinner. I was asking the waiter where I can find drugs. I was, eating, psychedelic chocolates in the parking lot, and things escalated quickly. And I just picked up right where I had left off before. And, man, dude, I think that was about almost 2004, just coming up on 2004. And then I was a big drink and drive guy. And eventually that caught up to me in 2006. I was living out of the beach area and I was living in Kensington, but all my friends were down at the beach. So I kept coming down the beach and getting fucked up and trying to make it back to the East County. And those people, like all of a sudden, like, I would get away with this stuff, but man, I got busted finally for my first DUI. And then soon after that, it was probably about a year, within the same year, maybe within 12 months, I got my second DUI. And, that kind of started the journey for me towards recovery. The first 3-month program I went to, I was still using and I was still drinking while I was going to the 12-step. I was driving illegally. The 18-month, I was doing the same thing, and then I stopped going, and I blamed it on the counselor there, that I didn't like the counselor. So when I came back, I knew I had to finish the program. I came back, and they gave me another counselor, and she was the one that planted the fact that she was the first one that really made me think that maybe I needed to get some help and that I needed to seek Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that woman was the woman that really planted in my head that, what do I have to lose? That maybe what I was doing wasn't working so well for me. We talk about, a seed getting planted once we get into the rooms of recovery, so when I first went to get my court slip signed in that first 3-month program, it was crazy. Like, I was like, who are these people? I'm not like these people. I just wasn't ready to hear any sort of a message. And so, but the seed was planted, as they say, right? And eventually I started going back for that 18-month program, and I ended up not being ready still. So that was like about 2006-07, and I didn't get sober, and my sobriety date is January 26, 2011. And so I went back out and tried some more controlled drinking. And that's when I met my wife, Carrie, and we painted the town red for about 5 years. And then eventually it got bad enough between the two of us. We painted the town red together, man. And I told her I wanted a woman that was going to stick right here, because I ran pretty fast and I was still slinging drinks and I was out every night and I was doing all sorts of crazy shit. And so, just like every other woman in my life, I started to kind of meddle in hers, and I started to bring her over to the dark side. And then, like, she was a strong businesswoman who had some money, and so like all the other women, like, they weren't like that. So it didn't take long to burn their lives to the ground through my actions. And so I tried pretty good with my wife, but God intervened again, and showed me another window of grace. And finally, I think it was like 2 years before that window of grace came along. I would run my fingers through my wife's hair every night for 2 years and say, I'm going to get us out of this one tomorrow. And that was really hard. That was really hard because I blamed her demise on me. And if it wasn't for me, you'd be fine, And so eventually, she got away from like being so concerned with the anonymity. And, she had a young daughter at the time. I think she was 10 or 11. And eventually we decided to go to a meeting. And we walked up the stairs she'll tell you that I dragged her up the stairs by her hair. To the North Shore Zolano Club in Pacific Beach, Casson Law. And we had our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as members do, they gather around us after, and they asked us if we had a big book, and we had no idea what the fuck that was. And they said, well, maybe we should get you guys a big book. And I said, well, what do you think, babe? I'm like, maybe we get one and we can share it, And they laughed at us, of course. And so, that started our journey. And, from that day, like, we haven't had to have a drink since that day to this day. And, the journey inside the rooms was tough at first, especially coming into recovery with my wife. We still have the same sobriety date. I wish she would have said yes to come here. She's got a lot on her plate right now, but, it wasn't easy at first, man. We detoxed in the back row. I couldn't look at anything but the floor. Men kept inviting me back to the rooms. They were glad that I was there. And that was just like, nobody had said that to me in a while, like nobody really wanted me around much at the end of my drinking career. And, but I stayed, and, I did the whole come late all the time. I would come after the meeting started and I'd leave before it ended. And dude, I just like, I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but there was enough of a message there that like I was curious. And, the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is an amazing thing. But when I got there, I was in such like when I kind of came to finally in that back row, like I just started like judging everybody and comparing myself to everybody in the room. And do I really like, I'm not as bad as that guy and they're not as bad as me. Do I really need to be here? And someone started talking about, his name's Dave Hopper, and we called him Hop. And from the podium, he started talking about all the times that he was able to stop, but he couldn't stay stopped on his own. And like that clicked for me in my story. Like that was my story. And then the next words that came out of his mouth hit me upside the head like a 2x4. And we hear it a lot in the rooms, but I needed to hear it right then. And that was that I can't fix my broken brain with my broken brain, and that's what I had been doing. Like, that's why I was able to stop so many times, but not stay stopped, because I was trying to figure this thing out on my own, and so for anybody out there that's struggling with that, right? I realized over and over again, and I had to be reminded that, like, someone, my sponsor, the people in the rooms kept asking me, how's that working out for you? And it was undeniable almost every time that, like, what I had been trying wasn't working, bro. And so, I didn't have enough courage to ask somebody for a sponsor or to sponsor me, another man to sponsor me. And so, like, there's this guy, every time I left early, fucking Jeff Mahoney, he was my first sponsor, and he would say, all right, have a good one, and then finally I was leaving early one night, and he said, hey, he stood up actually this time. He stood up and he said, hey, you need a number? And of course I puffed up pride, full of pride. I was like, sure, like whatever, sure, and I got to the bottom of those stairs, dude, and I cried like a little baby, and I needed that, and I called that man, and we sat and had a coffee, and I told him a little bit about myself, and I asked him if he'd be willing to help me, and I still get emotional talking about it. And God put that man in my life. We started to work the steps, but the thing is that when I'm still up in those rooms though, and I'm new, like I kept seeing us as all different, and like I wasn't really getting the message. It was hard for me to hear it. It was hard for me to comprehend it. And I think most of the reason for that is that I was looking at the differences between me and all the other people in the room. And someone suggested that maybe I see us all as one, as God's kids, if you will, and that there's no rank in here, and that why don't you try to look at the similarities, try to listen for the similarities. And I think that it was at that time, that moment, that I started to do that, is when the program of recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous started to infiltrate my life, and I started to hear the message more than the mess, I started to share the message more than the mess from the podium, and my sponsor took me through the book as if I was going to take another man through the book, and that's what we do. So, next thing you know, I'm, taking this amazing journey with my sponsor, and, he's showing me how to take other guys through, and, my life is beginning to change. But one of the things that he said to me that helped me to sit all the way down when I got into recovery was that he just painted this picture of like, listen, Doug, he's like, obviously what you've been doing hasn't been working for you. He's like, I want to take all this stuff that you're holding so tightly, and I want to take your stuff, and I want to just like, I'm going to put it over here, right? Like, you can still see it. It's right here, but I want you to try to just let's leave that there for a minute, and let's try this over here, right? And the only thing that I hadn't tried at that point was like the God angle, if you will, a spiritual angle, and because I was so like that wanderer from faith, a bewildered one, I was like so like anti it, that the childhood God wasn't working, right? And so, through a lot of work and with the big book and through the help of the other men and women in the rooms, I somehow found my way to this, back to a spiritual way of living. And so besides that, I had built this foundation through the first 3 steps of recovery, admitting to my innermost self that I had this thing when I really didn't want to have it. I came in at 41, dude. I tried every imaginable remedy. I wanted to like make it tap out, but it made me tap out, and so I basically just surrendered. It probably came around the 3rd step, right? But now I had my foundation, and I was coming up on 90 days, and my sponsor had said before we started, listen, Doug, your stuff's here, and if you, at the end of 90 days, don't feel like your life has changed for the better, I will fully refund your misery, and you can just walk right over to your pile of shit and pick it up and move along. And so, I mean, I was that kind of guy though, that I was going to get the refund. I was like, challenge, like let's go, and I thought that I was going to prove him wrong, but little did I know that, that things were feeling so good at that point in my life that I wanted to see what was next, and so
Hey, Doug.
yeah.
Hey, Doug, so out of all that, there's 5 things. I got 5 questions
Okay.
already. So one is, I love your term, you had a bad Coke habit, because I've yet to meet somebody that said they had a good one, a good Coke problem. Second, I love, if I could get a guest like this every week that just talks, I love it. Third, I can't even imagine you on cocaine the way you speak with the energy. I love the Boston in you. It's just flowing out because I feel comfortable hearing you talk, because you talk like you have so much energy and you're so passionate. You have a passion and an energy all bottled in, and it seems like recovery does well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way. Even as late as you found it, you had that. It sounds like you just kept challenging yourself. You would recover, but then you made that mistake that I know from smoking. I did this trying to quit smoking. I kept going back. It sounded like you were rewarding yourself for quitting with the same thing you were quitting, which I remember going, you know what? I haven't smoked in a week. I deserve a cigarette. And have a cigarette. It makes no sense in the common sense, but that's what you were doing. You found the will to quit without any help, but then you rewarded yourself with the problem because you were so proud you quit the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
definitely. That's funny that you mentioned the smoking thing. Like, dude, I can't remember what year it was. Like, fuck, it has to like about 6 years ago now. Like, my wife kept going back. My wife and I are compulsive overeaters as well, right? And so, like, I work a program of Overeaters Anonymous as well, right? And so I've definitely relapsed in that a bunch. I've never relapsed in AA, but in OA, definitely, because of what you said. Man, I fucking haven't eaten a donut for a week. So I think, Scott talks about donuts all the time. I know he knows the struggle's real. And so the funny thing is my wife, right? She was going, like, to in early recovery. She was going to OHI. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's Optimum Health Institute. It's right across. It's literally right across from the Alano Club in La Mesa. It's like right across the street from it, right? And it's this healthy place where you go and you eat. A raw diet, and you can go it's like a week at a time, that you can go and you level up each week. You can take it as far, or do just a week, or do 3 weeks and do like this whole big program. Anyway, my wife kept fucking going, dude. She must have gone 3 times, and every time she'd ask me to go, I'm like, fuck that, I'm not going. And so she would go and she'd come back feeling good, and here I am still in the food, and I would just be sabotage her whole reason for going, right? Anyway, so long story short, she one time, like, I think the 4th or 5th time, she asked me to go, and I said yes. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, where did that come from? And so here I am, committed to go for a week, right? And we're about to go on this long road trip after it. We were going to go for a week and then hop in the truck and go, like, cross, like, through New Orleans over to Florida, blah, blah, blah. And so, but she convinced me to go for my smoking. And so right up until the time I walked in there, dude, I was like outside the gate. I pulled over and I had my last puff, and I just, like, crumbled the pack in my hands, and I just, like, got rid of it in the trash, and the last butt that I put out with my foot, I, like, stomped it extra hard into the ground. And I walk into the fucking intake, right? And there's this woman. I go to the bathroom and I come back out, and Carrie's all chummy with this woman that's receiving us. And she goes, hey, do you remember America? And I'm like, America? I only know one America. She goes to the beach meeting at fucking blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no way. And I'd never seen her without a fucking hat or sunglasses on, so I had no idea really what she looked like, right? And she goes, I heard you're here to try to quit smoking. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to give it a shot, right? And so she goes, let me tell you about my experience if you want to hear it. And I'm like, sure. She's like, it's really simple. She said, every time someone, asks me a question, like my response, anytime someone asked me a question, my first response was, I am a non-smoker. And I started laughing at her. I'm like, I'm glad that worked for you. Dude, I haven't had a cigarette since, dude. I haven't, and so my experience there for a week, like I used to smoke a cigarette every hole on the golf course, every hole, and so by the end of that week, like they do this like big circle, like this huge circle of like getting everybody together to, talk about their experience there, and my wife kept nudging me to go up and share. Dude, I wasn't gonna go. I wasn't gonna go. And then finally I was like, okay, I found the courage. I went up there, dude. And I told my story a little bit. And I've never sobbed so hard in my life. I had like this amazing spiritual experience when I was there over like quitting smoking, and I didn't know like that was gonna happen when I got there, but I can't even begin to tell you like this feeling. If you've ever had a spiritual, I'm going to say experience, because an awakening is a different thing for me, but like this experience was like real, and I'll never forget it, but anyway, just a little piece, you reminded me of that, and yeah, I am passionate about recovery because it saved my fucking life, dude.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because Scott mentions it a lot. Scott, you talk a lot about how even in one of your recent videos, you're not a one-way guy. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to quit something. And you're not afraid to try these different, whether or not you agree with them. Scott always mentions like the psychedelics.
Yeah.
If they work for 10 people, that's 10 people that are now sober because of, or whatever it is, because of that. But what questions you got for him, Scott? You want to chime in here? I haven't heard you talk in a half hour.
Well, no, I don't normally sit quietly, but when Doug likes to talk, and that was a great story, Doug. And thank you.
I might get rid of you.
That's okay. Doug's got some free time. So Doug, tell me, I'm going to throw off a couple of quick questions. What do they call that? The shotgun questions, and give you a chance to give me some quick answers. What do you like most about recovery?
Helping other men. Helping other men.
What do you like least about recovery?
That's a tough question, Scott. Business meetings.
Okay. And then I want to ask you, what would you tell somebody? Because, it's interesting. I know that row at the Alano Club. I sat there for a long time, and I remember going in the first time, and they go, you can't even get in the front row until you've got 20 years. I'm like, what? So I sat in the back for a long time, and then copped a real resentment. Then I went to the church in the second story around the corner. So let me ask you, what would you tell somebody who doesn't think they have a problem, but everyone else around them does? What would your highest and best suggestion be?
Well, does that person have a problem for real, but they don't think they do?
Correct. Yeah. They're the only, disease of denial. Everyone else, the family's worried, the significant's worried, the kids are worried. They've gone in and out, but they just haven't, they don't think they have a real problem, or they still think they can manage it. What would you tell them?
Yeah. No. What I would tell them is that I would tell them to go to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever A of their choice, and try to just sit down and listen and try to hear a message, right? And I know that's hard because of my journey and how hard it was. I didn't hear the message until I was ready, right? But I would say do that, but also try to find someone that you can respect in that room, and try to get a cup of coffee and try to go and ask questions about their recovery and how they did what they did to be where they're at in their lives.
Okay. From a parent's perspective, because I hear this a lot in my work, parents say, my kid won't listen to me. I can't tell him to stop doing it. What's your highest and best advice as a parent to a child? What would you say to the parent to say to the child, or not to say to the child, that may have an identifiable problem?
Yeah, I think that man, I've been through this with my daughter, and I've stepped on her toes through the process, and I've tried to seek help for her and force my hand in that. All I know is what I would say is, it's your own journey. I love you very much. I don't want to see you become another statistic. And what I mean by that is I don't want to see you die from a disease that could possibly take you out. But there's help out there for you. And I know that you're not going to hear the message until you're ready to hear the message. But believe me, if you're willing and you're able to just be open minded to hear what somebody in recovery might have to say about what their life used to be like and how they came to recovery and what it's like today as a result of that, it may change your mind. So maybe try to have an open mind and something good might fall in.
Got it. So here's my last question, and then I'll turn it over to you, Fred. We're getting ready to wrap up. What question have we not asked you that we should?
Geez, Scotty.
Scott's good at this. He's good at this. He's good at this.
Oh man. I guess I guess you haven't asked me about the unmanageability in my life. Before I came to the rooms of recovery and compared to the unmanageability in my life now that I'm in the rooms of recovery, because I had a problem with unmanageability when I started those steps. I was a high bottom guy, and I still had a couple of cars in the garage, a wife, and a job, and a company, and a blah blah blah. And so like I was like that. I was a functioning alcoholic, don't you know it? And so like I didn't think I was as bad as you, right? But like when I said that to my second sponsor, he said, "Hey," he said. I want you to write an autobiography of your life from the first time you had a drink till the time you came into the rooms of recovery, and I want you to write about it as it pertains to unmanageability in your life. And of course, I couldn't fucking just write an autobiography. I had to do bullet points, and like we'll talk about it when we get together. And he's like, "You know what an autobiography is, Doug?" So like 40 something fucking pages later, I hadn't even read it. And I sat down with him and I told him I was done. And he said, "How many pages you got?" And I told him, he said, "Okay." He said, "Come on over." And I read it to him and I handed it to him. He's like, "I don't want that shit." He's like, "I just wanted you to make sure that you knew like where this unmanageability in your life stems from as a result of the way you're trying to manage your life." And
That's interesting. That's an interesting tactic.
Yeah.
Get you to do the work.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to reflect back on, your first thing when with the 5 questions you were being asked, the first thing was you enjoyed helping other men, which is commendable. The second one, when he asked you the worst, I have to imagine that one of the worst things about being you or Scott is failing at helping somebody else. That has to hurt because not everybody succeeds in recovery. And you've had men within your grips that wiggled out, that have gone back to the drink, back to the drug. That's got to keep you up at nights wondering what move blaming yourself or something. Am I correct in that assumption?
I mean, dude, I think the first like maybe 2 times, I went and like I said to my sponsor, "Oh, blah blah blah, drink." He's like, starts laughing at me, and I'm like, What are you doing?" He's like, "Dude, we're fucking alcoholics. It's what we do." He's like, "All we can do is bring a message of recovery. We can't get them drunk and we can't keep them sober, bro. All I'm trying to do really here, Fred, by helping other men is to stay fucking sober myself, bro. That's all I want is I want to stay sober. And if these guys are ready, they're going to hear it. I think I'm a sponsor that really, I invest a lot of time in my guys. I don't chase you, but I do put a fire under your ass and I ask you, what the fuck are you doing for your recovery today? Because like I know what it takes to have a rich life today, and I try to do it all on a regular basis. And, I don't think it's fear. It's just a matter of like, I just like the life I live today as a result of just doing what I do in recovery,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good question. That's what makes our show. I think that's what helps our show, me and Scott, is him being an addict, me not being an addict. It gives different meaning and different views, different questioning, because I'm questioning because I don't know. Scott's questioning because he does know and he wants to hear if you know. So there's different aspects, and there's still a mutual respect, and I actually do care about people and other human beings from a recovery standpoint. But yeah, I thought you were very interesting. I enjoyed them, Scott. You were right. Scott was right.
Oh,
I think you're very interesting. I think it's something, I don't know if you do the talking circuit or something. I think it's in your cards. You have the ability. Me and Scott are both authors and we do the writing stuff. I don't know if you sat down and completed that autobiography or continued it.
I did. I completed it. And I haven't. That was very early in my recovery. So obviously, the journey I've had since then, the experiences I've had, have been. I mean, I wouldn't trade them for the world. You know what I'm saying? So like, not the good or the bad. I used to think that the only takeaway I could get was from something good that happened in my life. And I've understood through recovery that like there's a lot of amazing takeaways from not only the good but the not so
Well, I
good.
do think even, obviously I've mentioned I have done cocaine and all that, although I was never what I would consider an addict. I consider myself more a child of the 80s, but I think to keep into today's world and stuff, I think all three of us could probably safely admit that we've done enough drug or alcohol that today we'd be dead because of the fentanyl that's in these drugs. And that's a message we should get out to these kids. We're kind of lucky we grew up in the era we did because the drugs we were doing are now killing people, blindly.
You hear it all the time. I was at a meeting yesterday and just listening to people talk about, they can't even say 3 words because, another one bites the dust. It's amazing. People are like dropping like flies, and it's amazing. And I know that Scott's on the front line with that stuff, and I know both of you probably are, right? And my hat's off to you, man. And I'm grateful that you guys are there to help so many people. And I'm a service guy. I'll do whatever I can to help. So if you guys need help with anything, you just let me know. But
Well, that's great. Anything you want to add, Scott, before I sign off?
No, I think that the perspective that Doug brings, and I've been listening to his story for quite some time, and he mine, and it's nice to get a different perspective, and I think other people will be motivated, inspired, maybe even irritated that it can't be done because it's change is hard, and when you have to, I like to say when you give up your best friend, Mr. Alcohol or Mr. Cocaine or Mr. Marijuana, there's a grieving process that goes through that, and when you talk to the person who's using or under the influence or self-medicating, that's what they'll tell you. That's my best friend, or even cigarettes, or gambling, or or sex, or the internet. Those are all compulsive, obsessive, addictive behaviors that, if not arrested, will end you up in jails, institutions, or death. So, I mean, that's all I've got. Just thank you, Doug, for sharing your story today. So that's it for me.
Doug.
Yeah, I consider talk with you guys for a while, man. I mean, I appreciate it. I mean, just from some of the comments you guys have had, and there's so many topics, that I could have talked about too,
Well, that's why we'll have you back on. We'll bring you back on whenever you're available and stuff. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we do every week. We just talk.
Yeah.
Because listen, me and Scott often say we wish we couldn't do a show. That means we've solved the problem.
Right.
But we're not foolish enough to believe that we're just a piece of it, a part of it. So we always have something to talk about even when we don't think we have something to talk about.
Yeah.
We could always go back to the same thing. So this is your crisis coach with me, Fred Carroll, and Scott H. Silverman. Today's guest was Doug. We thank you very much for being on. And if no one has told you they love you today, we love you. And that is the end of the show. We will see you again next week. Thank you, everyone. See you later.